Hello, today I have a quick and easy project for you for a little baby jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. So let's grab our supplies and get going. So I've got some worsted weight yarn here in orange, and I also have some scraps of some black and some green over here for the face and the stem, which we'll get to. Obviously, if you're not going to put a face on your pumpkin, then you can leave out the black yarn, and you could also make your pumpkin any color combination you like. I'm using my H hook today. The important thing with this is gauge is not necessarily important, but you want to make sure your stitches are nice and tight. So you want to use a hook that is 1 to 2 sizes smaller than what you would ordinarily use for the yarn that you're using. Sometimes with these, I even go down to a G hook if I'm feeling like things are just a little bit loose that day. But you want your stitches nice and tight so that the stuffing doesn't show through. You also can use the yarn under method for your single crochets if you like. I will be using just a straight up standard crochet stitch today, single crochet stitch, but you can use any of the invisible decrease or invisible increase methods that you prefer for standard amigurumi work. So let's go. We're going to start with a magic circle. If you really don't like the magic circle, you can do a chain 2 and work in that first chain and then tighten it down, whichever works best for you. And then we're going to put 8 single crochets in here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we'll tighten it down. And I like to actually wait to tighten my circle all the way until I've started the next round so that my first stitch doesn't get quite as lost. And for this, we are going to be working in continuous rounds and not joining after each round. So sometimes it's easier to use a stitch marker to keep track of where you are. So for the next round, we are going to do 2 single crochets in each stitch around. Grab my stitch marker here, just so I don't lose track. So we're increasing in each stitch as we go around. And now that I've got these first 2, I'm going to go ahead and pull this guy tight so that we have a nice tight circle there. And these, if they feel a little bit tight to work into these stitches, that's okay, because the tighter your stitches are in this case, the better your stuffing is going to stay in place. My yarn is kind of squeaky today. Probably means my stitches are nice and tight. All right, so when we finish this round, we should have 16 stitches. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And for the next round, we're going to do one more increase round. So we will do 2 single crochets in the first stitch here. So there's the first one and the second one. And then in the second stitch, we're just going to do one single crochet. So increase, and then just a straight up stitch all the way around to give us 24 stitches when we're finished. 1, 2, 3, 23, 24. There we go. Now for the next several rounds, rounds 3 through 7, we're just going to single crochet evenly around. So for my stitch markers on this one, I'm going to do my first stitch here. And I find it easier to count if I put the stitch marker through the legs of the stitch instead of up here in the loop. Whatever works for you is great, but we're going to do 5 rows of just straight single crochet around to give our pumpkin a little bit of a body. All right, here we have finished. We got 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 for our rounds. Now it is time to start decreasing. And I do prefer to use the invisible decrease, which basically for our decreases, we're going to single crochet 2 together, but instead of putting our hook through both loops, we're just going to put our hook through the front loops only of those stitches. And it just makes it a little bit of a tighter decrease and less visible. So to get started, we are going to, basically it's just the opposite of how we increase. So we're going to single crochet 2 together, and I'm going to move my stitch marker up here. And then just a single crochet in the next stitch, and we're going to repeat that back around so that we end up with 16 stitches again. Right, and you can see here, if you look really closely, you can see where the decreases are, but they don't stand out like I think decreases do a lot of the time. And then our final round is going to be just decreases all the way around so that we end up back with the 8 stitches that we started with. So just single crochet 2 together all the way around. My tail likes to come out and play sometimes. And the last one. And that's our little base for our pumpkin. We're going to go ahead and cut kind of a long tail. Doesn't have to be super long, but you're going to be threading through these stitches. And then just to stop, I like to do a slip stitch into that first stitch and pull it through. But we're not going to fully finish them off yet because we're going to add our face first so that we can tie those ends inside. Okay, we don't need our stitch marker anymore. All right, now I like to, before I actually make the, I've got some polyfill stuffing here. And I like to put just a little bit in there before I start making the eyes because I feel like it lets me tie the eyes in place and the mouth a little bit more easily. It is a little bit fiddly, so if you can always start putting a little bit of stuffing in after the first round of decrease, but these are also so tiny that I don't know that it really helps that much. There are also instructions for making larger pumpkins on the blog post if you go check that out. And so with the larger ones, it may very well help to start adding a little bit of stuffing first before you get completely closed all the way down. Actually, I grabbed a little too much to start because I don't want them super full yet, just enough that I have something to grip the ends of the eyes. There we go. Now, for the eyes, you can do straight up embroidered eyes if you want, or I like to use little knotted eyes. So we're going to just cut a couple lengths of black yarn here. And to make knotted eyes, you're going to start, and you're just going to tie around, trying to get it kind of in the middle, and loop around once, loop around twice, and loop around a third time. And then you're going to pull it tight. And you can see it makes a kind of a bobble there in the middle, and that serves as the eye for these little guys. You can also crochet circles if you want, or just like I said, embroider eyes on, whatever mood you're feeling right then, to give your pumpkin his little personality, or her personality if you prefer. And then just going to kind of look at your pumpkin and pick a spot for the eyes. And we're just going to thread the ends on the needle and pull them through. And there's one eye, and then I just tie these off inside because then you're just going to tuck the ends inside and cover them with more stuffing too. Do the same thing with the other eye. Keep in mind that you want to keep your face close enough together when we add sew the lines in on the pumpkin here in about a minute. We're going to, you're going to want to make sure that your face is narrow enough that it'll fit between lines, but you don't want it to be squished either, because you don't want a line going down the middle of your pumpkin. And tie off those ends. And then for the mouth, you can do another knot eye like that, and another knot. You can make a little circle, or you can embroider a little smiley face on there, or a scary face, whatever mood you're feeling for your pumpkin. I think I'm gonna just do a little smiley face with this one, so we get a little bit of black yarn here. And I'm gonna come down through the top of the pumpkin for his mouth. And I'll just leave an end out the top so I can sew them together again. And then just kind of pick your spot, and then I'm gonna go there for the bottom of the mouth, and then pick a spot that looks like it's symmetrical on the other side. So there's one side, and then we're just going to come back down through that same spot and up through the top again. And he's got a little smiley face. He's a happy pumpkin. Just going to tie that, and we'll tuck our ends in. And then we'll add some more stuffing. You want your pumpkin to be firm, but it doesn't have to be hard as a rock either. Just firm enough that it holds its shape and doesn't squish down too much when we go to sew these lines in. And I should say too, when you leave your tail, we're going to close up the top, but you also need to use that tail for sewing in these lines that I've mentioned. So there, see, he's pretty firm, but we're not seeing the stuffing poke through. These are also great ways to use up if you have a stash of little yarn bits. That makes great stuffing for these guys. All right, let's go ahead and thread our tail on our needle. And looking at the top, we're just going to weave our way around these stitches so that we thread it up there, and then we can just pull it tight. It doesn't have to be super pretty because we're also going to be sewing our stem through there as well. Now, to make the lines on this, we're just going to go take our needle and we're going to go back down through. Now for these little guys, your regular yarn needle works, or if you're making a bigger pumpkin, you can get these super long needles, which that's a new find for me. I was pretty excited about that. I think that one's a Susan Bates one I found on Amazon. And then, but you're going to stick your needle through the top and then come back down through the bottom. And then you're just going to look at the pumpkin and pick spots that you think make sense. And so you're going to come back up with your yarn here and do the same thing again, through the top and then down through the bottom. And this is where you're going to pull it. Don't be afraid to pull it tight here. And then I like to start with the lines around the face, and then I can judge how many lines I want to do for the rest of the pumpkin based on how much space I have left. So there's my face. And then I'm just going to look at the top, and I'm probably going to do at least 2 more lines here that just kind of come around and see what makes sense. And this is where you'll be able to tell if you got too much stuffing, your lines won't indent. And if you didn't get enough, you'll end up with a pancake of a pumpkin. So you can always go back and just pull out your lines and add a little bit more stuffing or take some out if you think it's necessary. And you can also smush stuff around a little bit too. But then once you've pulled it tight, you're just gonna knot it off down at the bottom here, making sure you've kept that tight. And I just go underneath. Yarn came out of my needle, so I got to rethread my needle. You're just going to make a loop, and then you're going to stick your needle back through that loop, and that'll tie it off. And then you can weave in your ends a little bit, you know, pick out under a couple of stitches there and go back through. You just want to make sure this guy isn't going anywhere. And then, oh my goodness, it's splitting all over the place, isn't it? Sometimes the yarn doesn't cooperate. Like now. We're just going to trim that bit off. And then we're going to go back through. And then I sometimes like to just tuck the end in anyway. The important thing is you just want to make sure that you don't have any extra bits hanging out anywhere. So we'll trim that down. Whoops. And poke. Got a little bit of my black showing through there. So we'll poke that in. And there we have our little pumpkin. So we need to make our stem. So we're going to grab some green yarn, and we are going to, these are super simple. I'm just going to start with our slip knot, and I'm going to attach a stem. So we're just going to chain 7. Four, 5, 6, 7. And then we're going to just, starting in the second chain, we're going to single crochet down and do 6 single crochets in their little chain here. 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that's it. We're going to leave a relatively long tail here. And then we're just going to pull that through to secure it. And we're going to grab our needle. And we're going to fold this guy in half. So take the long ways and fold it in half. And just do a couple of stitches here to secure it. You can just be whip stitches around the edge. On each side. And for the foundation tail, you can either tuck that in, or we'll just use it to sew. Or you can just use it to help sew on too, either way. Just so it's out of sight. I'll tuck it back inside, and that gives our stem a little bit more structure to it. You could also add a little leaf or something if you really wanted to. And then, so we've done that, and then we're just going to position him on top of our pumpkin and kind of sewing in those same spots. You're just going to take your needle and work in there. This is a bit fiddly, and you just need to do really and truly just a few stitches to hold it in place. So you'll sew into the pumpkin and then back into your stem, and then in the pumpkin again. And back into the stem. Really about 3 or 4 stitches is all you need. You just don't want that little stem to fall off or flop over to the side. And then we'll do the same type of thing where we knot it off. You just want to bury your knot so that it doesn't stand out. So we do it kind of, try and get it as close to under your stem as possible. Make a loop. And then pull it through. And for these, really, I just I find a spot right under there and go through to the bottom, pull it through. And if there's any stem left, any tail left over from the foundation chain, I'll do the same thing. This one's short, so I'll stick my needle in first. Pull it down. And then just take our scissors and trim our ends off. And you have yourself a little pumpkin.